meaning full of energy or cheerful. In addition, as a senior, I asked her if you could have a fellowship to do whatever you wanted for a year, what would you do? And Ms. Kluva said that she would like to, so her primary research interests at the moment are cities as global actors, and thus she would like to visit both fast-growing cities such as Lagos or go travel to India, as well as dying cities. So please join me in welcoming Catherine Kluva.
Good afternoon, everyone. I have the pleasure of introducing Sarah Kalik. She is the Senior Advisor at Oxfam America and builds power in the U.S. to support international development legislation and socially responsible corporate policy. She runs Oxfam's Sisters on the Planet Ambassador Program, which engages 200-plus leading American women, including members of Congress, faith leaders, actors, philanthropists in advocacy to prevent poverty and injustice worldwide. Sarah also provides leadership on Oxfam's Behind the Brands, BTB, initiative, which assesses the agricultural sourcing policies of the world's 10 largest food and beverage. Since BTB's launch, Oxfam has secured new policies for women cocoa producers from chocolate giants Mars, Mondelez, and Nestle, and a landmark policy on land rights from Coca-Cola. Sarah is a Truman National Security Fellow and co-director of the Boston Regional Truman Chapter. She serves as a member of the Allocation Committee and an ambassador for the Boston Women's Fund, as secretary-elect of the International Health Section of the American Public Health Association, as a Food Tank Advisory Board member, and as a judge for MIT's Ideas Global Challenges competition. Sarah graduated magna cum laude with a degree in social studies from Harvard College. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Sarah Kalik.
Good afternoon. My name is Elizabeth Kapnick, and I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Paola Cecchi DiMaglio. Growing up in a family that led a nomadic lifestyle, Dr. Paola Cecchi DiMaglio spent a significant amount of time in rural and urban Asian environments and, consequently, realized early on the importance of education access and the value of role models, especially for women. She earned a JD and a master's degree in common and civil law and a PhD in political science and law, summa cum laude, while studying at universities in France, Belgium, and the United States. Dr. Cecchi DiMaglio is now a postdoctoral researcher at the Program on Negotiation at Harvard Law School and at the Women in Public Policy Program at Harvard Kennedy School. She is also a senior fellow at the Program on Legal Profession, also at Harvard Law School. Furthermore, she is a research affiliate at UC Hastings and at Stanford University's Gould Center, where she completed her PhD. Dr. Cecchi DiMaglio's academic focus is on the evolution of the legal profession in the 21st century and the effects that gender, culture, and organizational behavior have on international strategic alliances. She has published several leading articles and books on these topics. And as if that weren't enough, in addition to researching policy, Dr. Cecchi DiMaglio is involved in policy formation and works with several institutions and governments, such as the European Union, the United Nations, the Malaysian government, and the City of London. She is currently the co-chair of the American Bar Association's International Committee on the Future of Alternative Dispute Resolution and is chairing the Committee on Law and Gender for the United Nations Global Compact Project. French-Italian by birth and Dutch by love, Dr. Paola Cecchi DiMaglio, in her free time, enjoys traveling with her husband and cooking for friends. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Paola Cecchi DiMaglio.
Good afternoon. My name is Charlene Lee, and I have the fortune to introduce Ms. Andrea Pearce. Andrea is the Vice President for Communications at American Progress. She comes to American Progress after managing the TV and radio outreach for the John Edwards for President campaign. Prior to that campaign, Andrea spent time on Capitol Hill as a press secretary for Congressman George Miller of California and press advisor for broadcast media for the House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi. This is Andrea's third position at the center, as she previously served as the Director of Media Strategy, and before that, as a radio coordinator managing the radio station and booking American Progress staff and fellows on radio shows. As if that wasn't enough, she has also worked in communications and government relations for the Campaign for America's Future, Rhode Island Kids Count, and the Children's Defense Fund, and was also chosen for the 2012 Atlantic Brugge Young Leaders Program. Is that close enough? Okay, thank you. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Andrea Pearce.
So I have to thank the organizers for having me back, but most importantly, and you don't know this yet, I have to thank you. Because as was already said, we had a similar panel, and you had a wonderful alumna woman to put this panel together last year, and we're very sad not to have her with us this year. Sarah Lucas was a tremendous force in thinking very critically about constructing a panel like this and giving you some viewpoints into careers that are only about a decade, maybe 15 years, maybe 17 years ahead of you, which is to say that they are, all of the things that we do and all of the things that we have done are very much in your reach. And so up until now, this has been a great pleasure up until now, because I've been able to invite 3 of my close friends, close allies, close fighters for the good fight to be here with me and to be here with you guys. So this session really is an opportunity for you to ask us all the poignant questions that have been circulating through your thought process as you move toward the end of your college career, as you begin to think about moving out of this environment and out of this very rich cohort that you will be forming and you are in the process of forming over this week, and then of course next week with all the work on the issues that you will be doing together, but then also the wider reflections that some of these sessions will generate. So I sort of thought about the kind of questions, and these are things that we worked on together, the 4 of us. So I'm going to start taking myself out of this conversation in a way. And we'll go a couple rounds of questions, but I really am mostly, and we're mostly interested in responding really to what's going on in your mind. Since you've had a very busy week of things to think about, including some time with my boss yesterday. So we really want to hear first and foremost from you guys. So I thought, aside from these wonderful introductions, which make us all look wildly successful, I thought we would start by asking what it really means to do what we do every day, which in summary is respond to a lot of emails and go to a lot of meetings. That's probably true for all of us. But I thought I'd ask these 3 women to think about that, to give you a sense of how they got there, what it meant to get there, to their last, to this current position, and to reflect a little bit, maybe a decade back when they were sitting in chairs much like these, except for ours were less fancy. Whether anything that you do today was already, you could see that reflected in maybe some of your hopes that you had when you were graduating from college, or some of the visions that you were plotting out for yourself. So we'll start in this direction. Sarah, you get to go first.
Okay, so I say all of that.
You can say all of that,
right.
or parts of that,
Parts of
however
that.
you want to do that.
Great. Well, you all met me. I'm Sarah Kalik, but I haven't gotten to meet all of you. I looked at some of your bios online, but can we do a quick thing? Get you guys energized? Okay, just get your hands ready to raise them. Okay, raise your hand if you're majoring in something sciencey, something mathy. Maybe they're the same thing, I'm not sure. Something history-based, English, arts, anthropology, psychology, something else with an ology. What am I missing?
Political science.
Political science.
Oh.
All right, there we go. All right.
My brethren.
There we go. Who's from the West Coast? Who's from the East Coast? Who's from the middle? Who's from not this country? Fabulous. Where are you guys from? Shout it out.
South Africa. India. Hong Kong. China. Saudi Arabia. Georgia. London. Ethiopia. Addressed.
Very cool. All right, and who is watching the Patriots game on Sunday?
Oh. I didn't realize that.
This is a horror. All right. I'm going to stay, but it's tough. So, I work at Oxfam America, which is based here in Boston, and we always need interns, so that's my first plug. Check our website. We would love to have you come work with us anytime. And we have 3 main prongs of work. The first one is humanitarian aid. If there's a disaster, we're there providing aid for people who have experienced a tornado or something like that. Not usually tornadoes, usually earthquakes. We're in Syria right now. We've been in Haiti for a long time. We also do long-term development programming with communities. So we build partnerships with community organizations to help fight for women's rights, to build agriculture, to look at climate change issues. And then finally, no matter how many programs we did, we believe that there are rules and laws put in place that keep people trapped in poverty. So my job is to change those rules and those laws. And most of my focus is on rules and laws here in the United States. So I build power here in the US to support foreign aid, programming, programs for women, programs for farmers, all of that. Because here in the US, a lot of times when we have to have tight budget conversations, people want to cut foreign aid first, right? Because why do we care about those people out there? Why? Why do we care?
Because it may not be in our country, but it directly affects our security and affairs within our country, too.
Our security, our economy, our moral lives. We are global citizens. We're a global country. We're the global leader. We've got to be out there, right? So, so that's what I work on. What does my day look like? Emails, talking to people. I get out a lot, travel around the United States, and really try to build a constituency that supports this idea of a global America and a globe that we invest in. So I work on both legislation in Congress and getting the right person in Iowa to call their senator at the right time, right before a vote. And that's what our Sisters on the Planet program is. And then I also work on corporate policy. So the 10 biggest food and beverage companies in the world make $1 billion a day, and they have a responsibility to the people at the bottom of their supply chain. Who do they answer to? People who buy their products, all of you. So I work to really generate consumer energy around that. These are a lot of questions. It was a windy road to get here. None of your careers are going to be straight lines. I'm not sure if any of yours were. When I was your age, I thought I wanted to be a teacher, high school teacher in Boston. I was really concerned about the sort of socioeconomics of the of American cities and wanted to be a part of engaging kids in education who didn't always get the education that they deserved. And then I got a fellowship when I was 22 to live in Uganda for a year, and my everything just it was like Pandora's box. Everything flew out, and I was just needed to be doing work specifically in Uganda, and I worked there for about a decade, and then got to Oxfam. So there's lots more in there. There's lots more questions in there, but I'm going to stop there.
All you.
So I'm going to ask you, how many of you know a lawyer? How many has one in his family? So you probably are aware about what we are doing as a lawyer. A lot of litigation, a lot of talk, argumentation. But I realized that it was not the only thing we have. We have a mission as a lawyer because at the end of the day, everybody is interacting with a lawyer. And I thought that as a lawyer, we have a role to be helping people in reaching societal benefit. And one of the things that I realized early on is, as a woman, we are not exposed to the same chance sometimes or the same opportunity. I have worked in practice, major law firm in the world. Traveling all around was really nice, but it was not what I was looking for. So I decided to go back and do a PhD because I realized that it was important for me as a lawyer to communicate to the rest of the world about what we can do, bridging public policy, law, and businesses. From that, I met my husband. Best thing that ever happened to me. I was at that time in the East Coast, on the West Coast, I'm sorry, no, West Coast, I'm sorry, I was like, where I was. It was love at first sight. It was great. My parents were thrilled. He's Dutch, I'm French-Italian, but I never live as such full-time in France or in Italy, so my parents were like, oh, maybe she's going to be back in Europe. That was not the case. I went back only for 2 years and back here, so my parents were not really happy about that, but happy that I found the person who made me a better person. And then I had the opportunity to come and do part of my postdoc and now my research on women, lawyer, and businesses. And one of them is an amazing opportunity, and that I want to share it with you because she is a person who has been here as a student, but has made a great impact to me, and it's Amy Schulman. She was a general counsel of Pfizer, And she's the reason why I can stand today and tell you that Pfizer, behind only being a pharmaceutical company, it's an amazing company doing a lot of corporate social responsibility. And lawyers are playing a big role in that. Because at the end of the day, we are the ones seeing the contract, negotiating with suppliers. So that's on my research side. And on the other side of my lawyer part is I'm doing mediation, financial mediation in New York. I'm working with a retired judge of the Supreme Court of the United States. I'm very lucky to be on his team, but it's also very challenging because when we are talking about billions of dollars in the room, I have to face men, mainly a full room of 50 lawyers. All of are my peers, and I am sometimes, and most of the time, the only woman. So that helped me to shape my scholarly work. And I'm happy to be here, to thank Catherine to be here, and also you, to be listening to what we have to say, and I hope it will be useful to you.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me here. So I see kind of what I do in communications as being as taking policy ideas, and ideas are really at the core of what the Center for American Progress does, and animating them, whether they're for the public or for members of Congress, whether they're for governors, whether they're for mayors, or whether they're just for regular people about how to make progressive change in the world. We have a lot of different levers that we use to do that, and kind of my job is to figure out the right mix of levers to get something to the right audience to make the change happen. I think some of the good examples of what CAP has done, and we're only 10 years old. I was at CAP early in my career, so I've gotten to see it grow from a 20-person organization to now almost 270 people who are there, and we've been able to broaden the scope of ideas and broaden the scope of issues that we work on. A couple of good examples is the healthcare debate. In 2004, healthcare was really a political, hot potato is the wrong word, because it was really a no man's land for progressives in this country after the failure under the Clinton administration. It was really something that no real candidates were able to take up. As an outside force, the Center for American Progress was able to come up with our own plan for what healthcare could look like if we were able to pursue a plan to get all Americans covered. The party really couldn't do it at that point, and individual legislators couldn't really do it at that point, and certainly presidential candidates weren't doing it at that point. So we kind of took it upon ourselves to get some of the best heads and the best thinking in the room, grow some ideas, come up with a plan. We put pressure on people to think about the plan, to do more about the plan, kind of tinkered around the edges of what was going on healthcare, on cost savings and other things in the interim. In 2008, for the 2008 election, we hosted the only candidates forum that was focused solely on healthcare, which kind of brought every single candidate on the Democratic side and forced them to talk about the issue with an important audience of union members in Las Vegas, which also became an important caucus state. So we kind of got them on board, and then at that point, every Democrat did have a health care plan. We worked to get it passed in the years in between. And now we're working to fix it now that we've seen how some of the implementation problems that have happened. So that's kind of just one example of kind of how CAP works on an issue, and kind of how we've taken one issue from, I think we were in like the neither world, and now we're kind of in the space where we're looking on fixing a program that's now going to help millions of Americans get covered and solve a lot of economic problems for American families. How I got here, I think you've heard my career trajectory, but I would say like my most important job into doing political communications was selling shoes when I was in high school. It really teaches you something about how to listen to somebody and about what they want, or about what their absolutely nots are, and about learning how to just really hear what somebody wants. I think in advocacy, there's a lot of passion, and I work with a lot of really passionate people who want to tell their ideas in ways that are
that work for them, but not that work for the audience that they're trying to speak with. And so it's a challenge every day to get people to communicate in ways that work for the audience that they're trying to impact. And it's really about, and people say it all the time, and it's become, you know, a phrase that people just use interchangeably, but you have to reach people where they are and not where you'd like them to be. So you can't just force someone to care because you care. It's all about trying to reach people in the places that really impact them. So some of that is about opinion research and about really learning more about people, but some of that is being able to still communicate with normal people outside of the DC Beltway. I can't remember what the other things were.
When you were in college, did you think that this is what you were going to be doing?
Oh, I knew I wanted to do politics from the '92 convention when I saw the Clinton speech in prime time, and he spoke about growing up in a single parent family in a way I had never before heard a public official speak to me about there being hope and about there being opportunity to kind of grow out of whatever your situation was. And that just really, like, my heart opened up, and then that confetti fell, and I was like, that is for me. And I didn't know how I would get there, but I knew that, like, I needed to be there. I needed to do that. So, yeah, that was...
So I think it's really interesting because I don't think when I put this panel together, I was thinking about this so much, but these are three very strong women advocates that have had something that has happened in their life that has been a catalyzing moment, and that in part has really changed the trajectory of how they saw themselves or where they saw themselves. So you have three examples here of women who had very open hearts and very open perspectives and let a lot of unforeseen things come to them. And that, you know, with some of that with a lot of opportunity comes sometimes a little risk and sometimes a lot of risk. But, you know, you have three women here who have found their own way of paying attention to the world around them and trying to place themselves in an area or in a position where they can affect some kind of real and tangible change for a group of people that they're trying to move forward. And I think there's a lot of power in that. And I know from, as Sarah was pointing out, looking at some of your biographies, and then some of you I've exchanged emails with, that there is much of that in you. And I think there are this idea that you don't know whether, you know, an extracurricular or something that you're pursuing, whether there's not, as one of my professors from the Kennedy School would say, song beneath the words, which is to say a job selling shoes can have a really fundamental effect on how good you are at really doing your job. So those were the couple things that I just took away from this conversation. So I wanted to, when I was thinking about putting this together, I wanted to think specifically about how we as women deal with opportunity when it comes to us and how we address it, and specific choice points in our lives, because taking risks is scary. There's always the option and opportunity for failure, and what we do with difficult moments or choice point moments. So I wanted to ask the three women, and we're going to start with Andrea first, to talk about opportunities that she's had in her career and how she's weighed certain things, and maybe a risk that you took where you really didn't have any idea how it was going to turn out.
Yeah. Well, so I worked for John Edwards.
That was a risk.
That didn't go so well in the end, in case you haven't heard. But it was a huge risk because you had two very, everyone in the Obama campaign likes to say it was like it came out of nowhere, but like that was a very solid campaign with a lot of solid, political types behind it. Even when it launched, it had a pretty good footing. So, you have to make a calculation about which horse you're going to go with in a primary. And, I got a phone call on Christmas Eve telling me that if I wanted to take a job with this campaign, I'd need to move in 5 days. I'd have to leave my husband because he's a school administrator, and he had to finish out the school year, move to North Carolina where I'd never lived. I didn't know anybody.
and do this thing. And so it felt like a huge risk, but also a tremendous opportunity that has opened. I mean, in politics, I think that doing a campaign is your master's degree in a lot of cases. And for me, it was that. And so I think folks who are, if you could probably speak much, much better to somebody who wants to go down a more academic track. And that's kind of the experience of a lot of people that I work with outside of communications and people who work in policy. But for me, the learning experience of being on a campaign is beyond anything I could get elsewhere, certainly in a classroom setting. Absolutely, like the hardest work I've ever done. I would say like my days generally were from around 4 a.m. to around 7 to 10 p.m. depending on the day. So, and it's like that for weeks. It's excruciating. And I had to do things that were far outside of my comfort zone.
Can you give us an example?
Yeah. I had never really fought with reporters before. I had done other communications jobs, but when you're in third, you learn how to fight really hard. And you fight, I remember a good example is when we were in Iowa, and, it's like the most important state if you're in a primary, especially for us. It was like so critically important to we did come in second. I know a lot of people forget that we were second. We did not get trounced. We lost by like a percentage point. But they wanted to have our 3 senior advisors from the top three campaigns on hardball. And I was on the phone with the producer, and they wanted to put my guy outside in the middle of Iowa in the winter. They wanted to have the other 2 in a shot inside this center where a debate was about to take place, and they wanted to stick my guy out in like the cold blizzard. And I just was like, I am not going to lose this one. I am not going to lose this one. And at the end of the day, David Axelrod did end up standing outside. So no one ever tell David Axelrod, if you meet him, that I was the one who got him stuck out in the snow. But I was like, I fought this one till like the bitter end, and I was not going to take no for an answer. And I was like, I was going to like find every way. I mean, and it was helpful to me that we did more TV on our campaign than the other 2 combined. And I actually checked that, because you have to take every single thing you can when you don't have enough money to do all the paid ads. You have to take every free TV that you can find. So I was just working like a dog trying to get, half the number of people that I had at my disposal who are a lot less famous than Oprah on TV. And, you just learn how to fight really hard. So I had to fight.
Can you say one more sentence about your negotiation with your husband when you decided to take this job and how that felt risky or not?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. So I have to say there is no negotiating. He is incredibly, incredibly supportive, and I would say my decision to marry him was among the best decisions for my career as well as my life. And that, there are, I think this still exists, that there are men out there who say that watching their kids is babysitting. I don't understand it, and I'm glad I didn't marry it because he's a complete partner, and he packed up I bought a car the next day because I didn't have a car, and you don't need a car in Washington. I had my driver's license for 3 weeks, and I'm like, he drove me down to North Carolina. He lived in our apartment with nothing but a bed and a TV, so he didn't even have a chair to sit on because he moved all of our furniture to North Carolina, so I would have everything there. He's beyond supportive. So I have nothing but great things to say about him. He also never made me feel at all. I was actually worried about when he did move to North Carolina that it would be harder because without him there, I could work 24 hours a day and not have to worry that I was irritating someone while I was BlackBerrying in bed when I woke up at 4. But he never made me feel at all strange about, he's thank goodness, didn't need to be fed by my attention. He was perfectly fine by himself to go off and hike and run and Frisbee golf, whatever. While I was working. And, there was definitely a couple of weeks where I didn't see him awake for days. I would
leave while he was asleep and come home and he'd be asleep, and that's kind of, I was like, I miss New Year's and stuff like that. But you know, I mean, it's a huge sacrifice to do some of this stuff, and I'm sure your experiences are probably tougher than mine. But you know, he's incredibly supportive, so thank goodness. I mean, like, I think when men did powerful jobs like this, like 30 or 40 years ago, they had like a wife at home to do their laundry. And I, like, thank goodness, had like a husband at home who sometimes did mine, took my stuff to the dry cleaner and like clean the house and whatever. Because I couldn't do it. Like, when would you do it? I like went to I mean, like, people start to fall apart when they work this much. It's like really the truth. Like, your health really starts to go. You have no time to exercise. People on the campaign were passing out on the treadmill because they'd try to work out because they were so exhausted. You know, I had a seizure because of the stress. I mean, it's like
Doesn't this job sound
I know.
so much fun?
Don't you want to do this? I mean, it's addictive, though. I don't know what it is, but it is addictive. I can't wait to do it again.
Yeah, well, here she goes. All right, Paula.
The challenges. I think the biggest challenges I had was to walk away from a very attractive salary as a lawyer and to make a choice of this is not what I value every day and the reason why I wake up and I'm passionate about. A lot of people did not understand my choice. That choice was motivated, I will say, from a conversation I had with someone about my future, saying that I'm going to have children and I'm going to be less billable, and that's going to be problematic. And that's it. I'm done. I'm walking away. That's not who I am. I want to contribute to something else of the profession about what we are doing. And I want to write about that. So I think that was one of my hardest choice. The other one and the challenges was still here doing my postdoc, walking away from job opportunity, being back in practice, being back in government or working at other school where I turned down the offer because the value of either the organization or the project of what people were offering me were not matching my value. And I think that's something that is very important that I was not so much aware when I graduate about the importance of the organization for who you work and what drive you every morning. Do you believe about what you do? Because you cannot sell crap. I'm sorry. That is not working. You need to be in adequation with yourself. So that are, I will say, the two biggest professional challenges. The personal one was to marry my husband, and at some point, when you love a partner, you have to make a choice of, okay, we're going to move back for his career. And what about my own career? And I realized that by being in partnership, everything is about communication and discussion. Because sometimes you need to make some move for the others, but the other will pay you back. Mm-hmm. And my husband paid me back. I made a move. I had a great experience back in Europe. And we moved back here. And I thank him every day to be so supportive about my dream of changing the world. So that's something that is important. And what was the last question?
Well, you can take this wherever you want to go. You want to talk about a risk? A risk that was close to failure risk?
There is more than once. I think with age, I came to realize that there is no failure. There is only way of handling graciously what happened, because sometimes it's not what you expected. And you need to be able to deal with that. And failure is not something that I'm trying to have in my language. I'm trying to watch out very carefully about what I'm saying. Because everyone doesn't have it all. We don't have it all. That do not exist. That's a picture. everybody has his own challenges, and the failure of what you think you may have is never the one that no other can perceive. So what I think I have failed, other people think I have succeeded. And I think it's something that I carry with me all the time, because I get inspired a lot by my mentor, both in academia and in practice, and by other people who are doing amazing work, as the two speakers were more interesting than I am about what they are doing and how they're impacting on a day-to-day. And I'm thinking that my failure is, for example, not to turn down a good article for the UN when I speak about women and law, because I know that there is a public policy impact behind it. Or when I give an advice to the government of Malaysia about what I think they can do to change their law to attract more international businesses, to increase and to empower women in this country. So that's where I think my impact and my failure is on the day-to-day. I don't want to fail about helping other women and empowering them.
That was very powerful. Thank you. Sarah?
All right. I think I'm going to talk about just 3 risks quickly. But one thing about the having it all thing, you can have it all if what you have is enough. And if you celebrate it, and if you're thankful about it, and if you're really thoughtful, and if you every day you are thankful for everything that you have. So you guys are all in this room. All of us have had great triumphs and great tragedies in our lives. You're in this room. That's amazing. That's amazing, right? So you got a C on something. So you didn't get that internship. These are things that you will overcome. And again, there are deeper and more difficult challenges that you will all face and that you are facing every day. But there's so much to be thankful for. So you can have it all when everything that you have is enough. Okay, so risks. One is the risk of taking a job, which you talked about. When I was in my late 20s, I was offered a job on the senior management team of a small nonprofit, and I was going to be the youngest by 20, 25 years. Was I qualified? Meh. I mean, probably not. Just take those jobs that you're mild to moderately unqualified for. Why? Men do it all the time, all the time. Take the job. It's going to be hard. You're going to work long hours. You're going to cry a little bit. I cry. I'm a crier. Maybe you're not, but take the job. I think the bigger challenges for me are when to leave. So one, I got this great fellowship after college, moved to Jinji, Uganda, was doing really amazing work that I loved with fishing communities around Lake Victoria and looking at the gender dynamics of the sort of economics of these households and talking to women and looking at babies and just, oh God, it was fabulous. And the fellowship year came to an end. I still had money left. I didn't really have anything to do, but I had this really great guy who was waiting for me at home. And so I could have stayed and had continued my adventure, but I had another adventure that I needed to have back here in Massachusetts with Douglas Reginald Maxfield, my now husband. So, the most important thing in your life is your family and your friends and the people you love. Hands down. Hands down. So, it's wonderful that there don't have to be negotiations. There will be compromises, right? So I do international work. I live in a small town north of Boston. And I live there because my husband's a commercial fisherman in Gloucester, and you can't commercial fish, in Central Africa. You can, but he's not. It's not going to go well for him. So, we've built our lives together for, we've been together for 20 years, and this is my life, and he is the greatest thing that has ever happened in my life. So that was, again, a hard choice then, but a very clearly easy choice now. If we'd broken up, what would I be saying? Never leave. No, I'm just kidding, but anyway. Take risks in love and follow that, because that's really the center point for you. Finally, I was working at a small nonprofit and in my late 20s, and we ended up with a CEO who was really bad. And I was on the senior management team. He was making really bad decisions. The 2008 economic crisis hit. We were having a lot of really deep challenges. And the management team went to the board and said, look, this is not working out with this guy. you know, we laid out some of the major challenges we were having. And just, you know, nonprofits, everywhere, it's challenging to work everywhere. People are challenging, but nonprofit boards and the way the board was set up, the CEO had sort of exclusive access to them, and he said that we were difficult. We were difficult, which someone said something about difficult women. It's a good thing. Who said that?
There's a whole thing about how if you're easy, you don't get to heaven.
Yeah, heaven. I don't know. Difficult women. Anyway, long story short, they sided with the CEO. It became a very toxic work environment. And even though I had, you know, had this job that I did love and it was a really high level position, I knew that I had to leave because I wasn't healthy, because I was sad and upset. And when I went home to Doug, I wasn't a happy person. And, you know, he was sad for me and it was difficult. So I had to leave, and I had to leave fairly quickly. So it's also nice to have wonderful transitions where you look for a job and you find the perfect one, and then you take a month and a half off and you go to Bora Bora and you look at birds. You know, I mean, that's right. I mean, whatever that means, it's also very challenging. That often doesn't happen. That sounds good, right? Yeah. So I had to very quickly make a transition, and that was very challenging. So it was a risk I had to take. I ended up at Oxfam through an old mentor of mine. It was a great move, but it was challenging. So. But you have to leave. A lot of times people just get stuck in a job and you stay there. Sometimes you do have to leave.
So I heard a lot in that conversation. I'm very attuned to this now because I've spent 2 weeks at the Kennedy School, part of an experimental lab learning about leadership, and a course called Leadership on the Line, in which we're all encouraged to bring in our biggest professional failures or situations in which we were silenced, sidelined, neutralized, or assassinated. So I've been through a very heavy process, but through that heavy process, and the really encouraging thing is that you learn is you learn something really revealing about your own humanity. And I think the three women have sort of said, look, you know, before you jump to any conclusions, whatever situation you're in, you should know that the other person that you're in that situation with is carrying a burden or fighting a fight that you know nothing about. So this whole idea of having allies that will be able to serve as your reflection point, particularly when you're wrestling with issues that Paola was mentioning about your values and how they change and evolve. They will change and evolve over a lifetime, because the minute you expose yourself to different cultures, many of you are doing this right now by having come to the United States and left your parents and your value system behind, and have found in this circumstance a very challenging environment, both intellectually but also personally, of your own personal beliefs. So finding allies that will help you through that process, whether that is your partner, male or female, or whether those are your friends and your confidants or people that you meet in a very challenging environment like this one. They're people that are, you know, going to be willing and able to push back on you if you need that. And so there's a lot of richness in that. And negotiating your values over time, I had the same experience. I left consulting, as Allison was talking about, because I had arguably, this is very odd, because I kept remembering the motto of Kate and my alma mater, which is the motto of Brown University is to educate people to lead lives with usefulness and reputation. And when I was 31, I suddenly had this realization that in consulting, I was basically only making other people more money, and I didn't feel myself to be very reputable or in any way really useful. And I think Sarah just made a really important point. Leadership of any kind, and already in this room you've been called leaders, and you're probably really struggling with this idea of what that means and what all the expectations of all your various communities and your various perspectives are, and what everybody wants of you in the world when you step out off of this campus, right? And that is a very scary proposition. Leadership is never a lonely enterprise. It's a team game. If you ever feel that you are so lonely out there on your perch with a specific vision or a specific project, it might mean that you haven't listened well enough, because if you can't bring the people with you, you might not be giving them the work at a pace that they need to have it, or at a pace they need to hear it, or maybe you're too in love with whatever your vision is and it's really not what the group or your specific society needs at that moment. So I thought that was really valuable. And the other piece is that kind of work that kind of hard work, the kind of work that these three women are engaged in and that you guys will be engaged in, requires sanctuary. And the sanctuary and the strength that you either pull from inside yourself or your family or your friends or your allies or your trip to Bora Bora, that's important information. She's just given you a lot of data. She said I was going through a big transition and I needed to clear the slate and I needed to buy that time for myself.
I didn't go to Bora Bora.
Well,
I don't know if that was clear.
Point is, your Bora Bora might be your yoga mat, or, you know, might be a conversation with a friend, or might be time in silence, or, you know, or something like that. You know, I said about myself that I'm ebullient, and the lesson that I'm struggling to learn in 2014 is meditation. That's right, because there's always a lot going on in my head. So, yes, so carving out and finding out ways over the course of, you know, your life now, but as you move through it, whatever is your sanctuary, and those things, that touch point, whatever it is, will change over time as well. I'm going to go one last round of questions, which is, what is the greatest thing about being 10 or 15 years out of college?
Oh, boy.
Oh, yeah, you can start, Sarah. No pressure.
Oh, man.
Oh, wait, maybe we can make Paula start because she's in the middle.
Yeah.
Thanks for passing the ball. Knowing that people take risk on you. And that whatever you plan of today can be very close to what you were imagining or not at all. But you need to take risk. That's the best thing that it happened to me. And the other thing is dreaming. Always dream. Because I think if the morning you wake up and you don't think you can change and you can have a great impact to your community, and you can, when you are somewhere, you can always think, oh, I can go elsewhere and move again. And I think that's something that is important for me to dream, that everything is always possible. And the great things I will say is to meet amazing people and never know where that's going to lead me. Take the risk of speaking out to people after conference or class or wherever panel, and great friendship, work opportunity are always coming in a way that I never thought. You know, you can buy every book you want about how to make your career and arrive there. A lot of opportunities happened to me were really random situation. And I never thought about that when I was back in college. The other things not on that will be when I was a lawyer full time, that was not a 9-to-5 job. And that was not Ally McBeal either. So that was more spending my life in the office, having a bed in my office, which I found that terrible. But one thing that I learned is, back to what Catherine was saying, the leadership and the friendship. You never arrived wherever you are in life without other people. And the help of others, I think, is the strength that you have in life. As long as you're true with yourself and don't change just to please somebody else. Because sometimes you have to have hard conversation. And I think that's what makes you unique as you are. And you should always bring that with you. Never forget that.
Andrew?
I knew mine. Okay. I had to think about this because I had thought about it before. But one is that, and it could be a little unique to my workplace because I actually really love the culture there. But I feel like I'm the master of my own fate more now than ever. That I feel like my ideas are respected, and that if I saw something that I felt was really amiss, or like I really felt it like it was the wrong direction for us as an organization, or that we were doing something incorrect, that I feel like I could change it. Whereas I think as a younger staffer, you do see shifts happen in your workplace, and it's more difficult to have an impact on how those
like how those affect you, and also how the general direction of the organization. So I feel like like the Center for American Progress is not going to like run away from me in such a way that like I can't like be okay with it, or that I can't manage it. The other is, and this might be unique to parenting, having kids actually, so for some people really retain their perfectionism when having children. I don't know how anyone can do that. I mean, it's just completely, that you get dressed in the morning and then someone sneezes on your face. It's like there's so many moments like that it's difficult to count. I mean, that having 2 toddlers at home has allowed me to let go of any of the, I'm going to work this thing into the ground, or I'm going to just, I'm going to make this thing so perfect and read it so many times. It's just like, it's not, that just can't happen anymore. And so it has freed me actually in a lot of ways that I find to be like very healthy, that I couldn't do before. I needed to stay until the thing was done. Now I'm like, I am leaving because I have to leave. And the work is happening between 9 and 6. And then, I'm turning my phone off for that hour before bedtime so I can like parent, and I'll come back on and I'll work at night or whatever. But it has really allowed me to be in the moment more than I had been for a really long time.
Yeah, I would echo that. Just the balance is better. I work crazy hours in my 20s because I wanted to and I thought I had to, and all sorts of things. I don't really want to, and I don't really have to. And you don't actually know that. I don't even have kids. I just want to go home. Yeah. Yep. I mean, come on. Balance. Your circles get bigger. So, like, I have friends who I've been friends with for 20, 25 years, 30 years. I have new friends. I have friends from work who I have really great experiences with. My friends are all having kids. That circle's expanding. You just, the circles of love keep expanding, and that's great. I think, I get to look back at some of the things I've done in my career, and as someone, who works on policy, I can see that policy that was passed in 2005. I can see what it looks like 8 years on, and I can see the lives that have been saved, and I can feel like I'm really part of something bigger, which I like. You're more, I happen to be, hopefully everybody will be more financially secure in your 30s. That's lovely. There's something nice about that. I spent a lot of time eating peanut butter in my 20s.
Unless you go back to grad school a couple of times, you're still
right, doesn't always happen, and it's fine if it doesn't, but that I will say is a nice thing. Yeah, that's about it.
So I have a tendency to say that I think this decade, or probably maybe even the decade after, is the most liberating in a way. And if you think about your own college career, freshman year you were totally fronting it, like, this is great. I have no adjustment problems. This is wonderful. And so I mean, I sort of have the same sensation that I had when I entered my 30s that I had freshman year of college. I remember we came back and did sophomore orientation for all the international students because I'm German, and it was this cathartic moment where we all turned around to one another and we're like, that was awful. That was so hard, and everybody suddenly agreed. And that was very odd because I the whole time freshman year, I was like, well, everybody else seems to be doing fine, so I'm fine. And that it was really hard. And so I think coming into your 30s, people are facing, again, so many really interesting human challenges, and they're going through so many different, they're asking themselves so many questions. And the nice thing about the 30s, maybe because we spend all of our 20s working so hard and not really communicating with one another in a very sort of open way, because we've been trained, of course we have this degree from Wellesley, and of course, or we have to do this now. This is the gravy train that we've all bought into. And so I would encourage you, as much as you can be both curious and very compassionate about other people's choices, because the 30s have really unlocked that for me. And I have friends who have decided to have children, and then I have male friends of mine who have had difficulty having children and have gone through IVF procedures. And suddenly, I have male friends of mine from college who tell me that whole story, and then I sit with this and I feel this is very generous of them to share all that trial and tribulation with me, and by that same extension to be able to share that kind of joy. So I sort of felt like when I turned, not 30, because I didn't quite get the fact that I was 30 yet when I was 30, but 31, it was a really sort of, and the journey since then has been really interesting, because people are much more willing and able to share. And if you can front load that, I think it will help take a lot of pressure off your shoulders that you might be feeling, and a lot of, grief sometimes, but it will relieve you in a way that will allow you to be a little freer and peel back some of the things that might be holding you back, whether it's expectations that your parents have of you, or your siblings, or your teachers, or other people, so that you can get a little closer to what your true self will become.
So one thing I would add too is that I think this part of my career has taught me a lot about patience, actually, and that you start to have more of a long view, where I felt like earlier on I was like, bing, 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 bing. Oh, this job's come along and somebody wants me to do this, so I'll do this, and then I'll do that, and then I'll do this. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm going to be here for a while, And like if I stay in like this lane, which I like this lane, like I'm going to be doing this for a while. So how do I want this to look, and like where do I want to do it? And you start to think a little bit more about the construction of your job, but like to me it had always been such a rush, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, if I don't want to work at this White House, there will be other White Houses. Like maybe I don't want to do that when my kids are 2, but maybe when they're 10, maybe. So I think for me, I've just started to have a little bit of a longer view about those things. Like your career is not like your first job. It is like 40, 50 years. So you have a lot of time to do the things you want to do.
So as we go into questions, give us a little bit of flavor of who you are and what you're doing when you introduce yourself to us. I should say one more thing. All of us have signed an implicit contract with you to be here for you during this time and during the tea. But I got a lot out of having continuing conversations with the Albright Fellows that came before you. So at least in my part, this is an open offer to continue to engage and continue to be curious and to continue to ask questions. Some of them we will cover in this room, and others we will cover in other ways. So
I'm actually going to pass the mic for this session, but who has the mic? Oh, great.
Yeah, there's your.
Okay, great, wonderful. Okay.
Don't be shy.
Emma.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you all so much for being here, for your stories. This was just really a fabulous opportunity. My name's Emma Smith. I'm a senior here at Wellesley. I study economics and Middle Eastern studies, and I'm hoping to be back in the Middle East region, hopefully either this summer or in the fall. Something that you all, some of you sort of touched on that I'd really love to hear more about was establishing your work-life balance. And I'm curious, the point at which you decided, I'm not going to do this anymore, I am going to establish a work-life balance. How did that go in your workplace? How did that change happen, and how did you feel about it?
So I feel like there was like one negotiation point when I was pregnant with my second child, where I was lucky enough to be offered another job and said, like, I'm going to find a way to get a day at home, like either here or here. And it worked out that I ended up getting, I stayed where I was at CAP, but worked out getting one day at home. And that day to me is like sacred. It is, yeah, it is. It is. I can get more calls done, more reading done, and more laundry done on that day, which as like, that's my task in our home is laundry. So it is like, thank goodness for this. And, I still have to do weekends. I had to pull a day long on Saturday to do training, as Catherine knows, because she was trying to talk to me and I was trapped all day. But it's far less frequent now than it used to be. But, I guess I'm just I didn't protect myself and my time before, and now I guess I fight harder for it because I'm more. My kids probably don't care really at this age. They're like 5 and 3, and like, you know, their interests are like fleeting. They're like, "Hi, Mom. Wow, who are you?" I had surgery on my foot recently. My son didn't just like refuse to recognize that I was like even in the house. So like, like I said, their interests are fleeting. But I'm more miserable if I don't have time with them and also time to myself. So I've become fiercely protective of my get out of work at 6 time. So I don't know if that speaks to other people's experiences, but it did make me like I fought harder for myself.
So I worked at the small NGO for 7 years. Worked way too hard, had no work-life balance. How did I know I needed to leave? I was crying all the time as a 30-plus-year-old woman, which like pull yourself together. and I gained 30 pounds. I wasn't exercising. I couldn't like do anything right, and I was like, I am unhappy. I need a new job. And I went to Oxfam, where there is a much sort of a really good culture of work-life balance. So I was able to make the transition both because I wanted to do this job, I wanted to work at Oxfam, and because it is a culture of 9 to 5, and then sometimes there's more, and sometimes there's more here. But I mean, it's much better, and you will know when you've reached your point, and try not to get to that point. Yeah. I would really try hard not to get, like, maybe only gain 10 pounds. Like, it's hard to lose it. One thing about the 20s and about work-life balance and about women, in my 20s, was not forgiving towards women with kids who weren't working the hours that I was. Mm-hmm. I was not forgiving. Some of them did their job, and they did it well. They just did it differently. Some of them didn't do their jobs, but it wasn't because they were a mom with kids. It was because there was somebody who doesn't do their job. Okay, so I was not able to disaggregate that well enough. I don't have kids. I don't know if I'm going to have kids. I probably will have kids. But having seen much more, I understand that you can be at an office Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and still do your job really well. But so that's just a lady thing, like be forgiving to women and more men who are, and I hope more and more men are going to be asking for flex time. To be with their kids, to babysit them. That was a joke. I do have a friend who has used that language, and he's in trouble. But so anyway, just be forgiving towards your colleagues.
I'll say one thing before I let Paola have our closing word. For this class, I took an incarnation of this class 5 years ago, and the one article that I read that really struck me because it resonated so much with the work environment I had that I felt very punishing and where I was very unhappy was an article that it was called How Women Compete, and it noted that women compete through martyrdom. And when I read that, it slapped me in the face because I had a specific situation with a woman who was roughly on my sort of pay grade and level, but she was a lot older than I was. And, you know, I wasn't doing all the things that I've just given you to do, the homework, which is to be compassionate and considerate and to listen for what else might be going on. You know, and so the way that we competed is by staying at the office longer and longer and longer, sort of to say, no, but the mission of this organization means more to me than to you. And I mean, you know, this really sort of perverse, like when you get out of that sort of situation, you're like, what on earth? And so that's important, right? Because men, I think, oftentimes will compete much more openly, and so that was one thing that really struck me. I mean, I too have gone through professional situations where, you know, where I didn't have healthy ways of seeking sanctuary, and my response was this sort of emotional response that Sarah is talking about. And I think that's, I mean, there's catharsis in that process as well, but then it has to come with, you know, thinking about how you're going to manage yourself better. You know, setting boundaries can come in different ways. Sometimes it's some kind of activity or something that will allow you to have a hard boundary. Since I was in college, this is a little odd, I have taught spinning. And so I have to leave at a specific time because there are 25 other people waiting for me to guide them through something completely different that has absolutely nothing to do with my day job. And they see me in a very different role. They see me as a very different person when they, you know, When they know that I have a job at Harvard, that's sometimes very jarring to them because I'm trying to get them to help them to lose the 15 pounds that they may have gained through their unhealthy work-life balance. So that is to say, I'm not advocating, that can also become a source of stress and what have you. But if you treat your other activities, as if you had 25 other people waiting for you on the other side, there's another boundary there. You can set, just in as much as you can set a boundary. We just set our boundaries differently, right? We mostly set them on, we take time out of our private life or out of whatever we think is our sanctuary. And then we move that boundary. So if you can find some way of saying, well, there's importance here and resonance here, then maybe that can help. And then you can become a certified spinning instructor and make sure that you have 25 people waiting for you at the end. I'm kidding. Paula?
On the work-life balance, because I'm both in academia and still still practicing. Sometimes I cannot have a 9 to 5. That doesn't work. So, for example, just coming in, I had an emergency with one of the cases that I'm settling, and I have one party who need a response right now. And that right now is their emergency. And I learned over time that the work-life balance is also stepping back and saying, is it a real emergency? Because when I was younger, in my 20s, I had the tendency to always go right away. Now, I kind of balance when it's a real emergency. Doesn't mean that I'm not working on the weekend sometimes when I need to, which is lately a lot. But I'm more able to, I will say, jumping the 30s, you kind of know and appreciate when you have time for yourself. Mm-hmm. And you are trying to embrace that time. And also taking time to call your friend, to call your parents and your family way much more than you were doing it in your 20s. Mm-hmm. One thing that I've learned on the life balance is taking care of my grandma. She's 96. I'm calling her every day. And that's something I was not necessarily doing in my 20s. And now I do. I call her, we are 6 hours apart, and I'm glad every morning after I come back from the gym, pick up my phone. How are you, Grandma? Because that's one of the driving value that I think is important in your 30s in the work-life balance.
I'll add one thing because it was sort of implicitly mentioned. Organizational culture, this is the kind of stuff that you actually are figuring out a lot doing internships. I say to all of my interns in the past or all the staff that I've managed that's been with me on a temporary basis, I said, you need to look around in this space because, you're going to get a task to do, but that's never the point in some ways of your internship. The point is to look at, okay, there's an organization of 10 people or 50 people or 2,500 people, and how do they treat people here, and how does the work flow? It's less about what's going on with you. It's more what's going on in the larger frame, because that's going to give you some useful information, partially about the sector or whatever that you're in, but most importantly about, how does this work? They're all humans that come to work, up until now. In your lifetime, that might change very quickly. You might be going to work with robots, but, those kind of things. So there's a lot of information and data that you're gathering as you're going out to your internships or planning your summers if you're juniors now that you might not be aware of, but that really ultimately is some of the more fundamental work that you're doing in these experiences to try to help you to figure out what do I need? Do I need a big organization? I need a small organization. Do I need, an established norm within an organization where it's fine to go home at 5? In fact, it's expected for you to go home at 5 and turn off your device for an hour or whatever it is. So you can actively be looking for that and listening for that already.
Mayor Alyssa. Laura is fine. It's okay.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. So I guess I'll introduce myself a little bit. I'm a political science and theater studies major. I'm originally from the Philippines, and now I live in Massachusetts. Thank you. This has been really wonderful. So we've had 2 weeks now of so many different speakers talking on so many different issues, and most of the time they're, you know, negatives. Most of the time they're the problems of the world that we're expected to solve, and it's just, you have to do this, but then there's this other layer of this, and there's more to it than that. I feel like sometimes, and especially in your lines of work, it can be really easy to get bogged down or to feel really helpless in the face of such bigger problems. So I wonder, is there anything that for you personally keeps things in perspective? I feel like you've already mentioned that a little bit, but like, for example, you know, having that sanctuary, having the time to think for yourself, but how do you stay on the bright side of things?
Well, that's a great question. Sarah, do you want to start? Yeah, I mean, a part of it is, again, reflecting on the wins you have. So the world goes up and down, but for the most part, I do actually think it's getting better, and it's because there's rooms of people like this, and there's a lot of people in the world who are doing really amazing things. It's not always like that. We're doing a lot of work on Syria, and it's absolutely devastating, and it is devastating. So, you know, to be perfectly honest with you, when I go home for the weekend, I go to spin class, I run, I have a dog. Get a dog. They're like totally amazing, and I go out with my girlfriends and I go out with my husband, and I think in my 20s and in college, I was so sort of, what are you going to do with your life? Every single second of the day needs to be something that you're doing for your life. Oh my gosh, just go out in the woods. I mean, we are not here that long. Here. Ladies.
So CAP is actually, like, among, you know, we're probably one of the more influential left-leaning organizations, but what we're not famous for is we have really big, great dance parties. And you will see people who have PhDs in economics, like, not twerking, but, you know, getting down. So I think we really foster a lot of fun. There's a lot of pranking. There's a lot of laughing. There's a lot of, you know, complete silliness. And I actually think that that's actually very rampant in politics. Like every political workplace I've had has had like tons of pranking. Really good ones. I've got lots of great prank ideas if you ever want them. I wouldn't try them out during your internships. Save that for later. But CAP also has a running team that I helped start. Our founder is like a huge runner. He's going to be in Runner's World this June. That was one of the most exciting things I placed this year, telling him about his Runner's World profile. He was very excited. Now he's at the White House, so I won't get to take all the credit, but whatever. But we don't actually run together that much, but we do race together, and that's really fun, and that always ends in drinking and eating too. So all the things we do are drinking and eating. So like those things are really fun. I think it's really great to have levity with the people that you work with. And also I know that we're also very apt to share real impact pieces. We worked really hard on the Shriver Report. I don't know if anybody saw it. It was all over NBC. We wrote the book with Maria Shriver. So that was a ton of work for a lot of people. And at the end of the week, we got a lot of notes from the people who were featured in the pictures in the book, actually, who wrote in just, you know, giving us updates on their lives about things and about how the book now being out has impacted them, and the conversation about women in poverty and how it's so important. We're really pretty good, I think, about sharing those things because I think it really is important to remember why you do what you do. You know, like there's one of me that works at like BP, right? And there's like one of me that works at like a big bank somewhere, and they get paid a lot more than I do. So it is important to stay in touch with, I think, what like grounds you and like why you do what you do.
So because the way I grew up was both my parents are surgeons, and they are working in humanitarian world, and they have strong value about helping others. And so I grew up seeing that around me and seeing my parents helping other doctor or patient to be able to walk or simply to give birth. And one thing that I've learned by living in Asia was to meditate and to have a grateful wall. So every day, that sounds crazy, but every day I write 3 things for what I'm grateful for. Every day, every night. And I have been doing that since the age of 6, I believe. So I have a lot of notebooks. And so in my bad day, I always go back to look for what I'm grateful for. So that's how I deal with sometimes a difficult time or a difficult morning.
I think it can be reassuring to know that I actually came to this realization because I started the 2 programs that I run at the Kennedy School, and I realized with a big, with some existential fright that if I get run over by a bus, quote unquote, tomorrow, God forbid, you know, all the stuff that I've done and built, like unless I commit it to paper or I commit it to other people, is gone. My boss does not know anything about the nitty-gritty things of running these 2 programs and how I spend our money. You know, so I realized that it was really, really, really important for me to share a lot more of what was going on in my head and deliberate with other people, partially so that they could tell me when I was wrong. And so I work a lot with my undergraduate research assistants and my graduate research assistants and the people in my team. So a lot of that, you know, that piece, because I know full well that, you know, ultimately, although that's maybe a sad thought, for my workplace, I'm completely replaceable. For the people in my life, my parents, my friends, my allies, the personal ties I have, those relationships, maybe not so replaceable, right? So I think that puts a little bit of stuff in perspective. And this whole idea of leadership, you know, you don't have to be in a position of authority to be performing leadership. And so again, a lot of times the leadership is, you know, because it's a team exercise, and for the whatever leadership you organize, you might not get, you know, CEO on your business card. You know, the success comes in all sorts of odd packages, and success oftentimes is a feeling. Sometimes it's a business card, and sometimes it's a big title or a plaque or something like that, and sometimes that combination comes together. But oftentimes that might not be the case, and so, you know, understanding that you have limited time to do stuff can be really stressful. If you think that you have to shoulder all this stuff by yourself, that's really frightening. It's really heavy. It's a lot of work. But then when you start checking in with other people, you realize that they feel that too, and then you can start trading off things that are in your, you know, proverbial backpacks with one another, and then it becomes slightly less of a frightening exercise, I think. All right, so we don't have a ton of time left, so maybe we'll take 3 questions at a time and then do one more round like that.
Okay, so
That'll work.
how about Charlene?
I'm going to write them down.
Jeannie?
Hi, my name is Charlene. I'm a senior studying history and computer science. I come from a technology background and will be pursuing that next year after graduation. So one thing that you guys talked about was having a close net of allies by your side. And that's been a common theme that has been going through this whole institute. I was wondering if you could share one of the best pieces of advice that one of those allies have told you throughout your time.
All right. Can we get 2 more questions?
Hello, my name is Jeannie. I am an international from Hong Kong. My majors are economics and linguistics. And thank you very much for sharing your honest stories and thoughts. It's been very empowering so far. And my question is, I think a common theme from your stories that stood out to me was that your 20s seems to be the 20s was a time for you to explore, to really try out different things so that to figure out your path. And in the previous week, we had a speaker telling us about how we should fail fast to succeed sooner. But I'm wondering, now that now at this point of stage of your life, looking back, do you think that there are other ways to do what you've done in the 20s? Are there other ways to do it in a more, less stressful way?
That was an easy one. We can all answer that in about 30 seconds flat. One more, please.
Study Russian and political science. I'm a junior. We had a speaker last week last Friday, who mentioned that one challenge women going into jobs and careers face is that they don't have the same mentorship opportunities that men often do. And I was just wondering if you had any mentors who you work with or you feel were good for you and how you found them and that. Thank you.
All right, Andrea, you get to go first.
I think mentors and allies to me have been really similar and probably tied together. So my first non-internship but job, my boss there was this wonderful woman named Mary Burdett, who's the head of government relations at the Children's Defense Fund. And she said to me, one day, out of the blue, the problem with all these nonprofits is the management, and the management is driving me crazy. You have a real talent for management. You should pursue management. And I was like, I had never thought about being in charge of anything ever in my life, and thought I would always be just a worker bee, toiling away. But she actually kind of opened my eyes that was something that I could do and I could be. So she was very impactful for me, just kind of allowing that to be in my in my world. And Jennifer Palmieri, who's now the communications director at the White House, kind of has shepherded me through 3 jobs now, and kind of just always, she's wonderful because she's tough, and she really recognizes people who put their heads down and put the time in and do the learning that's really necessary. And I think what's interesting in politics, and maybe this gets at the other question a little bit, is that there's a lot of really smart people who are really ambitious who want to do it. I mean, when I look around at the people in Washington, you don't believe anything that people in the world say about millennials, because everyone around me wants it, and they are working so hard, and they are so smart, and they're so good. And I think it's important as women to remember how smart you are, but not let that close you off from learning from everyone around you and being able to take in that advice and take in what people are telling you. And I think I learn from new people every day and consider, and now I think I'm a little more thoughtful as a manager too about kind of broadening that group who I want to learn from. I was thinking about my teen retreat, and I was I want this to be a TED Talk. I want them to learn what is the person who does social media outside of politics? What could we learn from them? What can we learn from other people who communicate effectively outside of the realm that we work in? So I just think, it's kind of opened up the world for me a lot.
So mentorship and ally, I think they have evolved also over time. And I was always surprised to realize that when I was emailing someone and say, hey, I have a question, most of them became mentor like that. And I realized that they were not only giving me work advice, but also life advice. And I really appreciate that, because at some point in my life, I didn't know exactly different things, and I just pick up the phone, and I say, I need to talk to you. And that was not work related, and I had great advice. So I had some formal mentorship with who I always had a relationship, and also created a formal mentor relationship. One thing that I will say that is really important, because they have been allied to me after it, is to share with them who you are as a person and why do you do the things, because they can always advocate for you when they know you and not the one on the paper. So I think that's something that at least was important for me, and always emailing them. One great advice that I had, one of my mentors right after high school told me, keep in touch with me. Even if I'm not responding, keep in touch. At that time, we didn't have email. That was later. But keep in touch. And I think it's always important after graduate to email and just drop a line. This is where I am. This is what I'm doing. I just want to inform you. Because you never know. Maybe that person one day may think about you and for a job or something else.
So I know we're running out of time really quickly. You can do your 20s however you want, your 30s however you want, your 40s. You can do anything that you want. And so, like, when you're in your 20s, I would just say if you have two opportunities, and one is to have, and I had this, I was just back from Uganda. I had an opportunity to work at a cool company in Boston, or I had the opportunity to go with my husband to run a fly fishing resort in the Bahamas. What did I do? I went to the Bahamas. It sounds really easy now. It was a desperate decision then because it didn't feel like it was my career, but it was Bahamas. Anyway, get out, do something interesting, do something exciting. You can do anything you want anytime in your life. I will say once you get a little older, you end up with a house, a husband or a wife, you end up with kids. It does get a little bit harder to do some things, but I'm not totally sure I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. My best friend and I just recorded a children's album. Next year this time, I might be rocking out somewhere. You don't know. So you really,
that would be a different panel.
That would be a different panel. So you can do whatever you want, anytime you want, almost.
I'll just echo that and say real quickly. Yeah,
I will.
Ask for these sort of mentor relationships. I mean, more often than not, you'll find people will want to talk to you. I think you're a very lucky generation. I think I had it really, most of the women and men, and it's always very important to get perspectives from both genders. Many of you that have spoken up, I think it's fabulous. You're doing, you're double majoring in disciplines that are not maybe naturally aligned. So to know that if these are a couple worlds that you inhabit, inhabit those in your mentors. Both of those sides or a number of those sides will have really different perspectives on, struggles at hand or like real questions, do I do this or do I do that? Or so ask them often, stay in touch. One of my mentors gave me some advice at some point. She said, well, go for people whose lives you envy, which I thought was really, I was like, that's so negative somehow. I'm jealous of your life and so high. And the truth of the matter is, the point is when you dig a little deeper, you'll suddenly realize that despite the fact that on the surface you might, envy their lives, they too have gone through different processes and different choices. And the rich thing for you is that, most of the people in our generation and, 5 years, 10 years older than we are even, a lot of them have gone through a lot of pretty significant career changes, whereas the women who are one generation above me oftentimes have done what my parents did, which is choose a career and work at it for 42 years. My parents didn't write a cover letter in their lives. They've never put together a resume. So this is where the parental advice always, really comes to the hard line. And that's when you can ask your parents again, oh, yeah, so Dad, so how did you do that? And then they're like, And that's when that's when you always know to look a little further for your mentors. So I don't know, can we do one more round of questions or no? All right, we're out of time. Thank you so much.